Hello, and welcome to FPJ Stories with me, Michael Barker. In this, our third episode, I speak to Caroline Drummond, the Chief Executive of Leaf. Caroline has been with the organisation since it began, and now, as it approaches its 30th anniversary, she looks back on all that it's achieved and lays out the strategy for the next 10 years. In a wide-ranging interview, we discuss nutrition, sustainable farming, the obesity strategy, and much more. Also, for the very first time, Caroline talks publicly about her battle with cancer and discusses how nutrition can play a key role in helping people with serious illnesses get back to full health. I hope you enjoy the show. Hello, Caroline. How are you today?
Really well. Hi there, Michael. How are you doing?
Yeah, not bad at all. Not bad at all. As we're talking, the weather seems to have finally turned after all these months of good weather. Have you had a nice summer?
We have. It's been, we've had a good mix of rain and sunshine. So I think that's been really quite good. It's good for farming.
Yeah.
It's been a bit of a delay for some farmers, but I think it's yes. Let's hope we don't get the winter we had last year. That's for sure.
Yeah, I think we could all do without that this year. But at least,
Mm.
yeah, the sun's been pretty good for fresh produce sales, I'm sure.
Yes.
We'll all be
Yeah, no,
turning to
definitely.
the winter veg soon.
Yes. Bring in the cabbages and the cauliflowers. That'll be good.
Indeed. And also coming up next year will be the 30th anniversary of Leaf. Is that right?
Yes, I can't believe where the time has all gone.
Incredible.
It is. Golly, it's gone really, really quickly. But we're really, gosh, the amount of changes that have taken place over the last 30 years has been astronomical.
Yes, indeed. And that's definitely something I want to dig into with you. But just before we do, what have you got planned for the 30th anniversary celebrations? Is there anything special that you'll be doing as an organisation?
Well, we'll be launching a 10-year strategy, so that'll take us to 2031. So we will have, of course, delivered all the Sustainable Development Goals. We would have met the Paris Agreement in terms of looking at reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And for us as an organisation, of course, we're hoping to get out onto farm with things like Open Farm Sunday. But I think a core part is going to be really aiming to scale up the activities of what we do in producing more sustainable food, which will be very exciting.
Absolutely. Let's go back to the beginning when you started. 1991, I guess that would have
Yes,
been, if my
yes,
maths
yes.
if my maths serves me well. What was the ambition when you started out with Leaf? When you set up the organisation, what was the hope to achieve, and how far do you feel that you've come along that road?
Well, I mean, interestingly, my first job description, it was for a 3-year project. I had been lecturing at an agricultural college. I was lecturing in crops and soils, and in fact, I'm a qualified forklift truck driver instructor, so I was doing that as well. And
Oh,
it was a 3-year project with the aim to reposition agriculture in the mind of the general public. Now, for me, I'm not originally from farming. My father was a diver in the Navy. And this whole area of every time, you get involved in a little bit more of farming, you realize, wow, that's just amazing. And how little there is an opportunity for most people to actually connect with the story behind their food. So that was, the headline ambition was very much about repositioning agriculture in the mind of the general public, but framing it in a practical, realistic, and sustainable way. So for us, that's been our mantra, really, with integrated farm management. I think we haven't quite repositioned agriculture. I don't know if we've fully succeeded over the last 30 years, but what we have succeeded is the opportunity to extend what was originally a cross and a pan-European project for now some 30 years, and I hope another 30 years beyond that as well.
yeah. I mean, could you have imagined that it would have become as significant in the food production and certification sector that it has today?
Not at all. I mean, we always had huge ambition, and some of that has obviously been met. And I think what inspires me throughout the whole time is the farmers we work with and the people in the industry who are is just so can do and really wanting to try and drive change and experiment and adapt and develop. And that for me has been so rewarding, really, more than anything.
Yeah, yeah, most definitely. So you mentioned the 10-year strategy. What can you tell us about what the organization wants to achieve over the next decade?
Well, we work as an organisation in 3 streams. So one of that is about knowledge generation and exchange. So that's our network of demonstration farms. One's in the marketplace with Leaf Mark. And in fact, some 43% of UK fruit and veg is now Leaf Mark certified. And the third area is in public engagement and education with Leaf Education and obviously Open Farm Sunday. Our big sort of strategy is to kind of build and develop and scale up the activity in those areas. And that's not just through us as an organisation, but through the partnerships that we have and will develop. And we may, and that's not just here in the UK, but it will be on an international level. We're already working with some 27 countries, particularly with Leaf Mark, and with some of our education activities. So that's really exciting.
Yeah.
And every time we work or visit some of those farmers, whether it be physically or electronically, it kind of farmers of the world unite to try and create solutions for things like climate change, improving biodiversity, and making sure we're producing healthy, safe, quality food. So that'll be quite a core part. It's likely that we will really push on 3 areas, namely health, diversity, and nourish. So health, ensuring we've got healthy bottom lines for our farming businesses, a healthy environment, and healthy people. And of course, healthy livestock and being a central part of that too. With regards to diversity, again, diversity of our cropping systems, diversity, and the veg sector are, wow, just so brilliant at that. But when you think about it, there are 300,000 edible plants out there, and at best we're eating maybe 200, and that's if we're being really inventive and looking at the whole spectrum of particularly Asian food. Yeah. And so the diversity in our food choices is going to be key, and using that again, linking back to the health piece, we should be eating for health rather than reaching out to medicine bottles for health. And then, of course, the diversity around the environment, how we work with nature, how we learn from nature, how we adapt with nature, and how we use nature to adapt and support changes and mitigation for climate change challenges. And then, of course, the diversity of our food culture. I think here in the UK, we have one of the most diverse cultures. And really, we don't look to engage in a full way to think about how we are a little bit more diverse in what we eat. And, yes, we eat curry or Mexican, but actually we could be so much more inventive. Yeah. And I've been really lucky. I worked in Barbados. Obviously, I get all the hard gigs when I was a student. And, when you look at particularly Asian, the West Indian food, gosh, we don't touch any of that here in the UK. So there's some really great opportunities. And then nourish, we want to nourish the brain. We've got to nourish our spirit and our hearts. And, that fits well and very cleanly as well, I think, with the mental health challenges, whether it be for farmers and growers or whether it actually be for, people in general, citizens as a whole.
Yeah, yeah. Well, some really interesting angles there that we'll come into in the next few minutes or so. In terms of Leaf as an organisation and as a mark as well, I know you've spoken about the potential to export that further. It is already operating internationally, isn't it? But you see more potential to go further with that.
Definitely. I think it's a really important at 2 levels. One, and because obviously, here in the UK, if we're going to be importing produce, either when it's out of season or that product that we don't grow in this country, then it's really critical that that is meeting the same high standards and requirements of our farmers. That's always been really important for us. And I think the other area is the fact that the challenges that are just around the corner are far bigger than any one of us can either create a solution for or imagine. And I think, the more that we can operate on an international level, the more that we can share learnings and build, much more resilient farming systems. We had a farmer meeting last night, and I always love it. I'm always so inspired by the ideas that come through. And we have fresh produce growers, we have livestock growers, we have arable farmers, and we have horticultural and enclosed environment farmers. And they're all saving the same ideas and sharing the same ideas and looking through the problems through their own lens, but at the same time opening their mind and thinking, that's interesting. They can do that in an enclosed environment. Is that something I could introduce into dairy farming or something like that? So, there's some really good and important dynamics, but we need to share. Farming is not a secret. It should not be a secret. And we have so many opportunities to be part of the really strong solution.
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, that brings us on quite nicely, I think, to the issue of where leaf is positioned. And it is very current, it's very topical, and it's exactly what the farming industry needs, isn't it? Because how concerned are you about the future of sustainable farming and the impact of farming in its current form on the planet at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes, you have that discussion and people say, oh, well, what's going to be the penalty if we don't do that? Will it mean that farmers will get paid less? Will it mean that food goes up? Well, the big penalty is actually that we don't address the big issue of climate change. I think because, we are principally across the world a very urban society, sometimes people have neglected to understand fully the systems that occur within farming. And so for us, that's integrated farm management. But we will see increasingly things like the circular agriculture and circular economy actually coming forward, where we have a less leaky system, and we're looking at much more attention to detail. And that's something that's really, really key. And we work at the nuances within the system as well. And I think, yes, it is something that we should all be taking very seriously. And the great thing is that as a farming industry, we do. And as a consequence, we can create solutions and actually make the solutions happen. And where, as consumers, we can respond to that, it's therefore to support those farmers who have gone the extra mile in delivering good environmental practices and more sustainable practices.
Yeah, and that's key.
Drives, absolutely key. Yes.
Yeah, because otherwise, I mean, farmers, I think they really want to do the right thing by the environment. They want to be sustainable. There's, of course, a cost attached to that, and there should be, I guess, a recognition from consumers, from supermarkets, that if what they're having to do costs a bit extra, that they need to be recompensed for the work that they're doing, don't they?
They do, and I think particularly in the transition time that we've got now, not only have we got obviously Brexit, but the recovery from COVID, all of this equates to the fact that we need to be doing some, huge amount of change, and that requires investment. And when you've got so many changes sort of stacking against us, the nervousness to invest is a really big challenge. So that needs to be supported with huge ambition from governments, both at a sort of a national level with things like, in fact, the National Food Strategy here in the UK with Henry Dimbleby's paper and work, but on a international level, the United Nations and FAO's work. And I think there is a nervousness from farmers, but at the end of the day, cheap food comes at a huge price. So we do need to be prepared to actually invest in value for, valued food, which has all the criteria that farmers have around the quality, the transparency, the food safety that we take for granted, right across the board, like animal welfare issues and, of course, looking after the environment. So packaging that is something that's very, very key.
Mm. And I mean, tying into all of that, the government wants the country to be net zero by 2050, I think it is. The NFU's gone quite a bit further and says we want the farming industry to be net zero by 2040. I imagine you're supportive of goals such as that. Maybe you think it should go even further. But do you feel that that's an achievable ambition, and what do we need to do to get there?
Obviously very supportive of it, and particularly the NFU's goal. One of our farmers, Duncan Farrington, who I'm sure many will know from Farrington Oils, has achieved net carbon zero and net plastic waste as well. So he's a first in the world, which is just fantastic. He's done that off back of a lot of his hard work, but also, as he very kindly says, too, the fact that he's LEAF Mark certified. And that's helped drive him to that level of ambition. But I think in order to get there, measuring is really key. And so for us, as an integral part of LEAF Mark, that's your starting point. But if we think what happens, if I look back at what's happened over the last 30 years, technology's changed. Our first LEAF audit was carbon copy documents. And the farmers were sending us back the ripped versions of the carbon copy. Now it's interactive online, whiz, and the technology around tractors, precision farming, nuances on crop protection and integrated pest management strategies, biologicals. It's changed so much. So if you fast forward even 10 years from now, our big achievement would be to do away with fossil fuels and to do away with concrete. And you hear some really exciting stories like Miscrete, where concrete is being made out of miscanthus.
Oh, wow.
University of Exeter are doing some work in that area. And we're starting to see hydrogen tractors. The will is there. And if you look, I can remember back in 1999, when we were looking at farmers measuring their energy input, they were doing really well. They could do electricity, gas, and fuel. And then all of a sudden it dropped, and we thought, whoa, what's going on here? And it was because in 2000, we started seeing the introduction of renewables, and farmers thinking, oh, yes, I can put in solar, I can put in wind turbines, I can put in ground heat source pumps, things like that. Yeah. So all of a sudden, although our metric dropped, the thinking of the farmers to try and approach the solutions in a different way was completely reset. And then it started to improve. And in fact, now 56% of our LEAF Mark growers will have renewables, or more than one. So I think, we've seen a dramatic change in this sort of area.
Yeah, most definitely. Part of the story that LEAF has created has been helping to reconnect the public with the farms, and I think have had a lot of success in that area. And one of those strands has been through Open Farm Sunday, hasn't it? It must have been quite a pleasure to see how that's grown over the years, and also a challenge, I guess, this year, because obviously a big part of Open Farm Sunday is getting people out on the farm, and you've been managing to do it digitally. What are you able to achieve by doing it digitally? And are you still able to make that connection where people can't actually be there and see it and touch it?
Yeah, I think the great thing about farming is exactly as you say, Michael. It touches every sense that we have, and and the more of our senses that we touch, the deeper the memory, the deeper the learning, the deeper the appreciation, and therefore trust. So Open Farm Sunday has been a huge success, and a big thank you to all the farmers and growers who take part. So each year, about 400 farmers, 10,000 helpers, welcoming over 250,000 people now, and so that's over 2.1 million over the last 15 years. This year, as you say, it's been different. We ran it in June, and in fact, we've just run it in September as well, over the weekend. It has been, we're just so amazed. It's been a huge success. There's been great engagement. I think the impressions will probably reach beyond 1 million, oh, wow. Which is very exciting. And it actually gives a little bit of a different dimension. So when you're going out on farm, the farmers are really proud, and everybody loves to touch a farmer. They love the story. They love that opportunity to hear that big story. And I think what Online Farm Sunday has done is provided a little bit extra, because you kind of see a little bit more. You get a little bit closer to everything, and a little bit more behind the scenes. And of course, we've seen the huge diversity right across the country, whether it be in Jersey with Jersey Royals, whether it be down in Cornwall with dairy. In fact, we came to visit my husband and me. Whether it be meeting people like Jake Freestone or Andrew Francis, or going all the way up into Scotland. It's just been brilliant. And in fact, the weekend that we ran in September, we went over to Ghana. And Blue Skies, who produce the most beautiful pineapples. It was just such a celebration of the care and attention that has gone into production. And it was, I think it's just so infectious, because as soon as you see the farmers and their passion and commitment to the soil, their water, the recognition that, climate change really smacks you in the face when you're farming, because you get wet or you get dry or you get burnt, and so yeah, it's added a different dimension, and I think going forward, of course, we really hope to get people out back onto farm, but we will be alongside that extending the opportunity and the reach for those people who are either deprived of the opportunity to actually go outside at all, or just because of the other challenges that we all have.
Yeah, indeed. And I guess kind of connecting with the public is something that a lot of people want to see as part of the national food strategy in some ways. And we've obviously seen the first part of that, and that was very much focused on the short term, on Brexit, on getting through COVID, and some of the issues we face in the immediate future. The second part, which obviously Henry Dimbleby's working on, it is going to be coming out, and that's the bit that's going to address the really long-term future. What do you, as an individual and as an organisation, want to see in that second part in terms of the future development and the positioning of farming?
I think there is such an opportunity for farming to be part of the solution in the health agenda. So I was really lucky in 2013, I did a Nuffield Scholarship, and the topic was, what can farmers learn from science to improve the nutrition of our food? And I went to places like Taiwan and the Netherlands, the Restaurant of the Future at Wageningen University. So I had, I went to Canada, and it was a real insight into some of the opportunities of recognizing that actually as an industry, we're not really hooked in to diet, and we're not really hooked in to see food as a solution to improved health. And there's, I think it's Aristotle or something, that famous saying, let food be thy medicine. And I think, as one of our members said to me a few weeks ago, I get it now. If I can do those little bottles of medicines and vitamins and things like that, if I can get that business kicked to touch because people are buying food for the value of their nutrients, then I've won. And I think that's the challenge. We haven't quite connected that market nutrient and density solution, and we haven't put farming at the center of food and the diet piece, and that I think would be the great thing, and of course underpinned by more sustainable farming as well.
Yeah, and it's kind of, there's an interesting balance there, isn't there? Because marketers will tell you, oh, we can't just talk about health because it switches people off. We should just only talk about enjoyment. But actually, what you're saying makes a lot of sense, that absolutely we should be talking about health, shouldn't we? Yes, of course, you need people to want to eat fruit and vegetables and other healthy foods as well. But how do you get that balance between prioritizing flavor and prioritizing saying, hang on a minute, this is actually great for your health?
And I think there's been some brilliant work. Guelph University did some fantastic work about, this is what we should be eating. So I think it's Michael Pollan, eat food, i.e. stuff that looks like what it originated from, not too much, and mainly vegetables. And, that is, the Eat Well plate is a very great guide. And then you look at what we actually produce. And, we should be eating about 50% vegetables, plus or minus, sort of thing. and actually we're producing about 50% cereals. And that's obviously on a global perspective. So if we could just, adjust that all a little bit more, so that we really are upping the volume and upping the noise and amplifying our role as an industry to be the solution for health. And it absolutely key. And the problem is the market focus is not quite there.
Yeah. And you're also an advocate, aren't you, of boosting the nutritional content of food as well. If we can't necessarily get people eating more of it, can we get them to eat stuff that's even healthier than it already is?
Yes, and I think we've seen, particularly in developing countries, we've seen some really good examples, like the orange-fleshed sweet potato, which is high in vitamin A, which has helped create some solutions, particularly where there's been blindness. And we definitely need more of that. I think it's often said that, obviously the soil reflects the nutrients that are going to be pushed up into the plant itself. And again, the real spotlight now on improving soil health is such a core factor. And that, without a doubt, is only going to be more beneficial from a climate change point of view, because we're sequestering carbon much more effectively. And then if we can enhance the nutrient area, then added bonus, win-win.
Yeah. I'm interested in your view on the the obesity strategy, which ties into this whole debate, because it seems to have divided opinion quite a bit. Some people favouring the stick over the carrot, should we say, more regulation, arguably a little bit more of a nanny state approach. Others say no, it should be more about positivity and encouraging people. Where do you sit on where we need to go to help with this?
Over the years, one of the things that I've learned in terms of driving change is pretty well there's four things. And that's the sort of the principles that we try and adopt in sustainability. And I use this as a parallel in encouraging the adoption of sustainability. So one is the show and tell. So, I learn from somebody else, and therefore that's an incentive enough, and I can pick that up. One is it's the right thing to do. It's easy for me to do. One is the marketplace, so I can buy into it. And then if all else fails, legislate. And I think what makes things stick better and most effectively is the buy-in of those first three. And I think one of the things that COVID has obviously COVID-19 has obviously demonstrated is habits can change. And, there's always a spectrum of change. So do you want me to start doing something? Do you want me to stop doing something? Do you want me just to do it once? Or do you want me to continue doing it? And I think we often design things in a very brutish way, in the belief that everybody's the same. Everybody's going to respond to those levers and in the same way, which doesn't happen. So therefore, it's really critical to have a really strong spectrum. So if you have a legislative approach, make sure that it is actually backed up by a really strong and collective area. And where the successes have happened across the globe in the obesity challenges have been places like Denmark or in France, where they may have had some taxation issue, they may have introduced some taxation, but alongside that, they've had community engagement, they've had market and communication activities going alongside, and they've made it easy for people. And I think that's something that's really critical. And I would hope, and I strongly believe that's the sort of approach that Henry Dimbleby will adapt and adopt, because he gets, this is not a single issue. It has to be a holistic approach in really trying to enhance and improve health.
Yeah, most definitely. And on the subject of health, and this is obviously much more personal, and I appreciate that it's not something that you've talked about publicly before. So I do appreciate you agreeing to bring it up. But you were diagnosed with breast cancer yourself 2 or 3 years ago, I believe. I have to say you look really well, so I'm delighted to see that.
Thank you.
How is that going? What was that experience like for you, and what's your journey been since then?
Yeah, I think is for anybody who goes through an illness, and particularly one like cancer, it's a huge shock. You always think, oh, it won't happen to me, although the statistics are pretty scary. And yeah, I mean, I had a lumpectomy, I had chemo, and I had radiotherapy. So I had the full works. And as somebody said, it's kind of, I think it was my dentist that said, well, chemo is the nearest thing to killing somebody that's legal. And so your immune system is fairly sensitive. I was pretty lucky, if you call it lucky, in that my body responded very well, and touch wood, I'm 2 years clear, so that's very encouraging and really helpful. So, but I think one of the things that yes, of course, it makes you rethink everything. It makes you understand who your real friends are. I was lucky; I carried on work. And I was able to, pretty well go to work the next day after chemo. I lost all my hair. That was hideous and horrible. But thank goodness for, good wigs and an eyebrow crayons.
Yes.
But, and I'll just tell you a funny story. So when I first wore my wig, in fact, it was going to the Farmers Guardian Awards, and somebody went over the top of saying, "Oh my God, your hair looks brilliant, your hair looks wonderful." And she didn't know, because I didn't tell many people. And after a bit, I just had to say, it's a wig.
Oh, no.
It's not my hair's obviously not that nice usually. But it does make you reassess things. And I think what challenged me was I asked lots of questions anyway. And when I started asking questions about the chemo drugs, the doctor couldn't tell me their mode of action, which, every one of your readers and growers will know the mode of actions of the chemicals that they will use on their crops. So I found that one, there are questions that they don't expect people to ask. And I think we live very remotely. I'm married to a dairy farmer, and the support, I was working full time, but the support for people with cancer in rural areas is actually pretty thin. And, I wanted to, I did want to get fit. I wanted to eat better. And, I'm not obese. And because I wasn't obese, I didn't fit in the right category for getting additional support. I was asking continually for help and support. A lot of it's directed towards Macmillan, who have done they do a brilliant job, but they don't operate in county, small regions. And in addition to that, doctors don't look to health and don't look to the diet to support the health. And I find actually that's a real opportunity, and perhaps something that Henry Dimbleby should be really looking to when people come to a crunch point in their life, i.e. a real wake-up call on your health, which could mean that you could die, then actually it should be supported by your food and your nutrition and your exercise programs alongside that as well. And I think that's really missing, because it's the one time people really start sort of thinking, oh my goodness, oh gosh.
Yeah, most definitely. So is there an opportunity as well for producers? And it's an absolute minefield, isn't it, around what you can say in terms of legally making health claims and so on. But is there more that the fresh produce sector in particular, I guess, could do to work with these organizations to say, this is time to be putting good, nutritious food into your body. It'll make you feel better. Funnily enough, my daughter, who's as a 16-year-old, doesn't eats as many fruit and vegetables as she should we say. When she gets sick, she'll be like, oh, I just want some fruit. I just want, it's hard enough to get her to eat it when at normal times, but when she's sick, she voluntarily wants to eat it. So you do wonder whether there is more that can be done around that.
No, I think there is. And it has, as you say, the real challenges around the labelling and the claims associated with the labelling. And I think this is where there is such an opportunity to really look in terms of, say, understanding what's the pairing of different fruit and veg. There's so much wonderful work and research that's happened right through to eat the colors of a rainbow type approaches, and the importance of, yes, I mean, our daughter was a vegetarian until relatively recently. In fact, university broker, making sandwiches in the morning at 3 o'clock, I think, always break every good student. But the challenge of, in fact, as you say, your daughter, my daughter, that body beautiful image, where they're connecting with diet and all their fats, protein, carbs. They want to look like somebody from Love Island. And in addition to that, they're actually sort of not really looking at the diet. They're looking at the content of the chemical content almost of the diet. Yeah. And I think we need to sort of draw back, because the beauty of food is the story and the growth of it and the care and the culture. One of my sister-in-laws is Peruvian, and her meals and some of the traditional meals that she grows are absolutely beautiful, and I love eating them because they represent those foods that are very valuable to her and her culture. So I think we have such an opportunity, whether it be in the raw materials or the composite piece of all those materials put together in a meal, which is what, as consumers, we have a meal. We don't, well, of course, we buy carrots and we buy peppers and things like that, but we don't kind of just tend to just eat them.
Yeah, definitely. Great. Just want to go back to how it all began for you and what you wanted to be when you were growing up. You said that you weren't necessarily from a farming family. In fact, your father was a deep sea diver for the Navy. Did you have any ambitions to go into something similar? And how did you wind up in the agriculture industry?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly spent, I was brought up right next to the sea, and I spent most of my time in dinghies or under the water. Yes, I guess what really changed it for me, I think I must have been about 4 or 5, and I had mumps, and I was sort of sent over to the Isle of Wight to go and spend the time in quarantine, in effect, with my grandparents. It was the time of foot and mouth, and all the cattle that were outside their house disappeared overnight. And to me, I wanted to be a vet. I thought, wow, gosh, I want to try and solve these problems. And I think agriculture then became more of a part of what I did. I picked veg. When I was 14, I could go and just walk down the cliff where we lived, which is in Hampshire, and go and work on local farms. In fact, Barford's have got their claim to fame. I worked for them as a stripper, and
wow.
And so I think that each time I've got engaged with a little bit more of farming, whether it's working in Wales or whether as every good agricultural student does, after I left Silhain with an agricultural degree, I travelled for a year in Australia and New Zealand and across Thailand and Mexico and places like that. So I think each bit of me has cemented on and more love for an industry that, well, now I have had years and years in.
Yeah. And you were one of the first MDS students, weren't you?
I was, yes. So they just started, and in fact, I put in the application from when I was in Australia, and I came back straight into a job working at Hattie, which is now part of Shropshire's. It was Greens then, and I worked for A.H. Worth as well. I left a bit earlier. I ended up working in Packhouse, and then I went to Shropworth to lecture. But I have a huge admiration for what MDS has done, for so many people, and is continuing to do in terms of growing. It is such an important learning opportunity, and skills, and that motivation of skills is absolutely key in the industry.
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, to round it all off, you've been 30 years with Leaf. Fantastic. But
Are you ever tempted to leave, to do something else? How do you keep motivating yourself to continue doing the same role and with the same enthusiasm that you do? What gets you out of bed in the morning?
Yeah, I love what I do. I'm very privileged in that it has developed, expanded, adapted, and changed over the years. If it wasn't for our wonderful team at the Leaf office, and of course the brilliant farmers and our fantastic and inspiring Leaf board and all the people, our members, who constantly nudge, and those people that we work with, there's always a little bit of an itch. And I think one of the things, as an organization, we've come through good and bad times, and we've been hungry. And I think that's one thing the NGO sector certainly learns, is hunger, where you don't have enough money. There's been years where I've gone through Christmas thinking, oh my goodness, is this organization a going concern next year? We're in a much more secure place now, thankfully, as an organization. But over that time, I'd sleep on the floor in the Leaf office. I would, we'd sort of beg, borrow, steal. We only stole biscuits, or obviously the odd bit of fruit, probably. Only if it was given to us, bona fide.
Right.
But ideas, we steal ideas. I make no qualms about that. But I think that's, for me, has been that constant nudge, that constant, we've got to do a really, really good job, alongside the sort of the ambition for obviously world domination, which of course is ultimately what we'd like to achieve with Leaf. So, and I think, we have the best and most wonderful farmers, not here in the UK, but also across the globe, and they are proud, brilliant people. And I think, for me, that has been truly inspiring, and to help give a voice to that, but also to help support a transition and change and development in any way we can is purely inspirational. So that's what gives me huge amount of pleasure and joy. Yes.
Brilliant. Well, I'd say that's an extremely positive note to end on. I think we're all fascinated to see where you take the organisation over the next decade, and navigate these interesting challenges we face, and keep obviously food and farming at the absolute centre of everything that's crucial to the country. So, Caroline, thank you so much for your time. It's been a joy to talk to you, and I look forward to catching up again in the near future.
Oh, well, and thank you very much indeed, Michael. Always lovely to talk with you. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Bye-bye.